Mike Lynch with Hartford Funds. Been with Hartford for about 26 years, traveled the country. As mentioned, I was doing a presentation recently in a small town in Kentucky, and it was an older VFW hall, so they had the seating set up, and they had about 150 chairs. So I said to the gentleman who was running the hall, is there any chance I can get a microphone? And I saw him kind of put his head down reluctantly, and he went into his utility closet, and he pulled out the old Bob Barker microphone. Remember Bob Barker? God bless him, at 80-something years of age, right? I don't know, I'm not sure how he actually was handling the cord, but he unravels the cord, he goes back into that closet, and he pulls out this old box amplifier. I think 1935 cutting-edge technology, right? So you made it as a speaker, right? It's time to retire. So I shouldn't have been watching him, but I am watching him. He undoes the power cord, he leans down, and I can't do it justice, but he has this look of horror on his face, and he shoots these sparks into he shoots the plug into the wall, and these sparks shoot back out. Then I'm thinking, who's the dummy, right? I'm connected to the other end of this thing. You know, 5th grade science, conductivity, I should have paid attention, right? So I'm getting comfortable. I didn't get electrocuted. I'm getting comfortable with the stage. I'm about a minute and a half into the presentation. And several people in the front row start pointing at me. I'm thinking, wow, this is great. It takes a while to warm people up. This is terrific, you know? Start doing more of the presentation, tend to pace, so you're going to have to keep up with me because I'm not going to not pace. So I tend to pace a little bit. Now 2nd, 3rd, 4th row are pointing at me. And I'm thinking right back at you, right? You knew you were good, you didn't know you were that good. I took this one additional step and I immediately realized what they were pointing at. And in all my enthusiasm, I had actually wrapped one of my legs around the cord. Fell flat on my face in front of 150 people. Now maybe it's a little dramatic, but if you thought you were falling to your death, which I did at the time, what would you say? Same thing I said, right? Problem is that microphone worked the whole way down too, so. Now that I know our microphone's working, I'll try and keep the cursing to a minimum, but I truly do appreciate the opportunity tonight. I want to talk a little bit about 8,000 days. I know there's certainly a curiosity factor, so I appreciate you coming in, not knowing at all what we're going to talk about. The idea behind 8,000 days is really thinking about the final segment of our life, our retirement, longevity. And maybe it's going to be 2,000 days, hopefully it's going to be 12,000 days. But 8,000 days directly translates into about 21 and a half years, which on average is about the same time that we spend in retirement. So through our research and through some of the work we've done, we've been able to hopefully share some ideas and thoughts with you about different segments of those 8,000 days. Now everybody's going to be different in the room. You may spend a couple days, you may spend a couple thousand days, but I think it's an opportunity for us to go through the exercise. So we at Hartford Funds have an interesting relationship with MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the leading engineering schools in the country, if not in the world. And within the engineering department is an area called the Age Lab. And Dr. Joe Coughlin, who's head of engineering, still teaches a number of classes. His passion, his real interest is in longevity, thinking about healthcare, housing, transportation, whatever the case may be. Dr. Joe and his team are on top of it. They're doing the research, they're doing the studies, and they're able to share that information with us and other organizations. A couple physical examples there. One is that Volkswagen Beetle. Now, it pales in comparison to the beautiful cars that you have out front, right? So I almost hate showing it, but that's probably one of the most expensive Beetles you'll ever see. It's actually a $5 million simulator housed up at MIT's Age Lab. They have individuals come in and drive this simulator, and they throw distractions at them. So some of the technology we see in cars today has been a direct result of the work that Dr. Joe and his team have done with backup cameras and blind spot monitoring and some of the features that are available there. Secondly, which I think is more fascinating, is it looks like a couple raincoats or overalls there with those two students or those two interns. That's actually an age suit that they've developed. They call the suit Agnes. It's an age gain now empathy system. And the idea behind this suit is to put it on regardless of age. Have the engineers come in behind the scenes and fine-tune that suit to somebody they think maybe is 70, 80, 90 years of age. So some of the fatigue, the friction, the frustration that we encounter as we age can be recorded firsthand with these suits. So a little tough to see, but they have those yellow restriction bands. It reduces our mobility. If we bend over too quickly, the suit actually sends a shooting pain up our back. So we're probably only going to do that once, right? It has a neck brace that limits our head movement. They have goggles that they think can mirror glaucoma. They have the helmet on. Once the helmet is on and actually cinched in, it actually allows you to levitate off the ground and float around the room. Actually, it doesn't. It's just a helmet. It's kind of a cool story, though, isn't it? Dr. Joe sent me an email recently, cease and desist. We're not that good. The idea behind the helmet is they cinch it in because many times we get older, we start to crouch down a little bit. That compression, how do we feel that? So they have them go through and do daily life exercises. Well, one of the companies and organizations Dr. Joe and his team just recently wrapped up a project with was the Transportation Authority of Boston, or the T. Boston, like many cities, DC and other cities, is going through this transition where more and more folks are moving out of the countryside back into the cities, especially those over the age of 50. Cities are crippled right now with the transportation issues. So they want to find out ways that individuals can take public transportation. The challenge is many of us as commuters, I travel through the Charlotte airport constantly. I rarely even look up. I just know where my gate is. I know where I need to go, where I need to leave. But what if you haven't been to that airport in a while? What if you haven't taken a subway or a train in years? So what's the experience like? So they actually had the interns put these suits on and go through the experience. What's the first thing you see when you enter a subway system, generally speaking? Staircases, right? And they're declining staircases. The handrail may be a foreign term. Well, maybe I'll opt for the elevator. Many of the elevators in Boston actually aren't working. If they are working, you probably don't want to get in there, so you're probably getting out, right? If you do make it down successfully onto the platform, can you see? Can you hear the train announcement? Can you read the map? So these are the challenges they're faced with, whether it's a bus or public transportation in general. So they're doing this work to be able to bring this back to their organization and others to say, how do we make things a little more appealing for those of us that do want to ride the subway or do want to go through the train? Those are just two examples. We work with them on the financial services side. Where do we see the future of retirement? Where do we see the future, more importantly, of really longevity? We're firm believers this idea of retirement was kind of sold to us. You know, started in the early 1900s, the Industrial Revolution. If you talk to a farmer or you talk to somebody who's self-employed, they'll tell you they probably have no intention of not ending or continuing to work. They don't have an end date. They want to continue to work as long as they possibly can. And I think for many of us, we probably want to do that. So we want to think about how retirement's changed a little bit and the opportunities it represents. So what we've accomplished prior generations haven't, which is a lot of extra time. The challenge is, what do we plan on doing with all that time? Anybody here envision what they're going to do their first day of retirement? I've kind of mapped it out, right? I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., my iPhone's going to go off because that's what I use as an alarm clock, and then I'm going to proceed to smash it into pieces. Anybody want to venture to guess what I've come up with for day 2 besides going to the Apple store and waiting to talk to an Apple expert to buy a new phone? That's about it. I haven't really mapped it out farther than that, right? So what are we going to do day 5? Day 1,000, day 2,000, 4,000. Becomes a little groundhoggish. Think about that day that you retired, the day before, how full your calendar was. What about the day after? And I think for many of us, we want to make sure we continue to stay active, continue to stay busy. And again, some of us may want to continue to work in that phase. But I think it's something the more we can prepare for, and I met some folks on the way in, they're already in that phase and are doing well. I applaud you. And I think there's some tips and tools of the trade that we can share to hopefully allow you to have a successful 8,000 days. So we want to talk about 8,000 days, and then more importantly, the 4 phases of retirement. We're firm believers there's 4 phases, and we want to go through those. And again, for everybody, they may be different time frames, but they're important to experience. And then last but not least is kind of preparing for those 8,000 days. So the early 8,000 days, again, translates to about 21, 22 years of our life. That early phase, from infancy to maybe 20, 22 years of age, our days are pretty much mapped out. Yeah, maybe it's our parents or grandparents kind of coordinating those days. Maybe it's early education to primary education. The growing phase, maybe going to college, wrapping up our college, getting a job, or joining an organization. Maybe it's relocating, getting married, finding someone. Maturing phase, right? Starting to think about what do we plan on doing. We're going to think about maybe scaling back a little bit. Once we get into those exploring phase, that exploring time frame, it's very exciting, but it's also very intimidating. Imagine tomorrow, nothing to do. Imagine the next day. Imagine the next month, 2 months, 3 months of vacation. Again, kind of romantic, but also a little intimidating. So we want to think about that, and there are ways we can prepare for that. Now, as I travel the country, generally speaking, folks will overestimate a lot of things, but we generally underestimate our life expectancy. We compare our life expectancy to our parents and grandparents. So a couple quick examples there. Jean Clement unfortunately passed away at 122 years of age. I'm a big fan of Jean's. I've been trying to get in better shape, but I've decided to follow the Jean structure from a healthcare perspective and for physical fitness. Anybody want to venture to guess what age she stopped smoking? Age 100. I don't even smoke, but I'm thinking about taking it up because she lived to age 100. She rode her bicycle every day until the day she died. Why I'm a huge fan of her, I'm going to follow her, I'm going to be a Jean disciple, is she was a firm believer you had to eat a pound of chocolate every single day. Yeah, that does worth an applause. Catherine Switzer, right, the age of 70. You may have seen an E! special or ESPN special on Catherine. They claim she was the very first female to run the Boston Marathon. Unfortunately, she ran about 2 years prior to females being allowed. Someone actually found out she was female about 2 or 3 miles in and tried to push her off the course. Well, she has done incredibly well and continues to be successful. Julia, I love her nickname, Hurricane, right? Hurricane Hawkins, 103. She's the oldest individual that's still on a relay team. She runs the 100-meter relay. And then Kane Tanaka is the oldest female or the oldest individual in the world. So think about those life expectancies. Think about 10 or 15 years ago. Would I have been able to put up those individuals? Maybe similar pictures, but they're probably in their 80s, if not 90s. Where now it's 100. Dr. Joe's a firm believer that the child is going to reach age 125, was born in 2017. Now we have no idea who the child is, right? But is 125 an overestimation, you think? What was healthcare like 125 years ago? No one can remember, obviously, right? But if we read about it, leeches were common practice 125 years ago. You went to your barber for more than just a haircut, right? So arguably, we've had some improvements over the years. Think about 5 years ago, some of the things that we've seen compared to what's today is like. 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I think we'll actually, or someone will utter a statement 125 years from now, I can't believe that person died only at 125. So that's going to magnify that. That's going to change that as well. So life expectancy continues to get longer. Two separate set of life expectancy tables. One that takes into account infant mortality, things that happen in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. Another separate set of life expectancy tables that takes into account or kicks in when we reach the age of 65. So a husband and wife that reach age 65 join a separate set of life expectancy tables. So as you can tell, by 2016 or in 2016, 43% chance that one of us is going to reach age 95. By 2029, estimated 50% chance that one of us is going to reach age 95. Relatively healthy and active, unlike prior generations possibly. So we want to be prepared for that. So anybody have these images in their mind when they think about retirement? Maybe it's chasing that white ball around, hopefully getting the better of that white ball, right? I met a gentleman recently, he was in his third retirement on a plane. He said, I'm in my third retirement. He said, my first one, I chased the white ball around for about 300 days. He said, if you say white ball or you show me a white ball, we're going to have a problem. He said, I never want to go back to chasing that white ball around. Maybe it's travel. Maybe it's a little exercise. I think that's retirement. I think this is longevity. I think this is really more of a practical image of what we're going to face and future generations are going to face. We're probably thinking about our kids and grandkids. Maybe we're the primary caregiver. We're going to think about downsizing, maybe upsizing. You know, thinking about our friends and relationships. What can we do around the house? How can we stay active and stay busy? I think the word retirement is going to be replaced. I think our role going forward is we're going to be job changers. We're going to change from our current job to a future job. Now that future job may be caregiver. It may be the lead chauffeur in your group. It may be the golf pro in your group, right? It may be continuing to work part-time or full-time. It may be a whole new organization. You may be someone who relocates. Whatever it is, I do think we're going to take on new types of roles. And it may not just be one job change or one type of role. It may be multiple roles. So we need to be prepared for those. So the 4 phases of retirement. So the honeymoon phase, or kind of that honey-do phase, as we approach that phase. What are some things that we can expect? What are some of the ideas and thoughts that we have? The big decision phase. The quicker we can get into that phase, which we'll talk about these 3 questions, allows us the opportunity to really kind of position ourselves and hopefully, as we get towards that point, allow us to be a little more successful. The navigating longevity phase. So unfortunately, maybe one of us becomes ill or acquires some type of disease or acquires some type of issue. What does that mean? Taking on that caregiver role certainly is a challenge. And then the solo journey phase. As we enter that phase, unfortunately, if one of the spouses passes away, if we're a husband and wife, and we have a spouse that passes away or a partnership, what does that mean? How does that impact our life? How does that change our life? So the honeymoon phase, or kind of that honey-do phase. You know, kind of that romantic notion, right? So we thought about maybe travel. We thought about downsizing, slowing down a little bit. Maybe it's traveling with the kids. Maybe it's, continuing to work part-time. Going through that process, I think, is important. That role of work is going to be a bigger and bigger challenge for us. Quite honestly, many companies right now are struggling with this. A number of companies, Fortune 500 companies, have come to Dr. Joe and his team and are really thinking about their organization. Many CEOs right now are struggling with the fact that the age range of their company is 50 plus. Well, that's great, but what does that mean in the next 5, 10, 15 years if folks want to start retiring? That knowledge base, that skill set, that culture is going to change dramatically. So many companies are starting to say, forget about the hard and fast 65, 67 example. Let's see how long we can keep Mike. Let's see how long we can keep other folks. Maybe we work part-time. Maybe we scale down, maybe we consult, whatever the case may be. So that will continue to be something. Income is always going to be important. The folks that brought you here tonight do a phenomenal job of keeping you on track. And then the family dynamics, how that changes and how that relationship changes. So there was a term out there called the gig economy. And the idea behind the gig economy was individuals thinking about part-time positions. So a group of economists came up with this idea, and they thought primarily individuals 18 to 24, 25 would take these roles on. Where more often than not, it's somebody actually in their 50s, if not later. You know, folks that maybe want to think about starting to slow down but don't want to stop altogether. Not really sure what that next position holds. Uber today just announced with this gig economy a feature now that they're going to be in the business where they're actually going to help individuals that are entering that kind of longevity or navigation phase, ideas and thoughts where they can think about getting into these gig economy types of roles. So we can go out, and the future idea is we can go out and list some services, list some things that we've done, maybe some interest, and they'll connect us with another organization, another type of company. So it's not just Uber and Lyft and maybe an Airbnb, but we'll continue to see those types of things. Maybe we want to continue to stay active, continue to stay busy. Maybe it's financial support or financial need. Maybe it's something we have a new interest. We want a job changer at some type of new role. You know, for many of us, maybe we're kind of in the sandwich generation, taking care of our parents and also taking care of our kids and grandkids. Financially, certainly a challenge, so we may want to continue to stay active and continue to stay busy as well. So Ebrey did a study. It was an organization that did a study thinking about sources of income in retirement. And you haven't gone through this process, I encourage you to do it, and you probably have with the advisors and the quality of the advisors you have tonight, but really thinking about your sources of income in retirement and where they're coming from. Now, for years, there's been a term out there called the three-legged stool of retirement, which is your pension, your personal savings, and then your Social Security. So thinking about those three legs, and we don't think Social Security is going to go away, but Social Security, that leg's a little wobbly, or could be a little wobbly. Pensions really are a foreign term for many folks. Many companies, many corporations and private institutions have said, you know, we're going to do away with the pension. We're going to have a stronger 401k or 403b. Well, there's a recent study done and asked individuals, tell us a little bit about your sources of income in retirement. 59 or 56% of the people responded and said, well, I'm going to get a check from my company. Well, instead of just taking it at that level, they said, well, tell us a little bit more about your organization. Tell us a little bit more about your pension. Actually, come to find out when they pressed them, only 23% of the people that responded are actually going to be receiving a pension. 67% of the people that thought their company was going to kick in a little bit, that company doesn't have a pension anymore. So not to bring us on a downer there, but that certainly is a challenge. We want to think about that. So what I think as we enter this honeymoon phase or start thinking about this honeymoon phase, don't wait until we retire to experience some of these things. Let's think about try before you buy. I'm a big believer, big fan of trying things out. If we're thinking about relocating to the beach, we're going to stop altogether. Have we thought about maybe just renting a house on the beach for a month or two? See if it makes sense. Met a husband and wife recently. They went through that experience. They sold their home, downsized. The beach, the beach, the beach. That's all they ever talked about. They said, we bought our dream home on the beach. What we neglected to really do was research what type of community this beach is. It's a very seasonal community. During the summer, there's a ton of people. They said, right now we're in a home, and there's 10 homes on either side. There's nobody there. And there's probably not going to be anybody there for a while. Who we can have lunch with? Who we can interact with? Thinking about travel, thinking about some of the experience with travel. It's hit home with me because I remember the day my father-in-law retired. I remember the hour he retired because I was over at his house. And I remember distinctively my father-in-law making the turn around the corner of his home and pulling up with the ugliest Winnebago you've ever seen in your life. I am firmly convinced that he stopped and tried and find the ugliest one. There's some beautiful Winnebagos. I think he passed them all and found Big Bertha, the ugliest thing in the world. It was a 40-foot Winnebago. Now, I've been married for 27 years, known my wife for 30, which means I've known my mother-in-law for 30 years. Never in 30 years has she ever uttered the W word. It was never her dream to drive this Winnebago. So you can imagine how successful that Winnebago was. As a total side note, this was a 40-foot Winnebago. As a son-in-law, there's nothing more fun than to remind your father-in-law constantly that his driveway is only 35 feet long. I used to kill him with that one. The vein would come out of his neck. I'll make it fit. I'm like, I'll bet you will. He did because he parked it between him and his neighbor, and he lost his neighbor for years. So let's try before we buy. If we're thinking about maybe going part-time, let's talk to our company about that. Is that what we envision? We don't want to get fired for doing it, but let's start to have that conversation. If we're thinking about traveling, What if, come to find out, one of the spouses really doesn't want to travel that much or didn't experience that? Life gets in the way. Life's going to change. We need to be prepared for that. So I think the honeymoon phase is important. We want to start thinking about these ideas, but the more that we can execute them, the better we'll be. Which brings us to that next phase, the big decision phase. This of the four is probably the most important. This is really the idea, and again, everybody's going to be different as far as how many days or how many years you're going to be in each of these phases. But the quicker we can get to this big decision phase, or at least begin to have the conversation, where do I plan on living, what do I plan on doing, and who do I plan on spending my time? It's so important to really go through this process. So for some of us, we may want to downsize, we may want to upsize. By the way, does downsize mean smaller square footage or smaller price tag? It could mean both to some extent, right? But some of the cities right now, folks are moving back to the cities finding out, I went from a 4,000 square foot home to an 1,800 square foot condo, and my condo is double the price of my home. So downsizing sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work, unfortunately. Maybe it's staying in a rural area, moving it to different locations. You know, for years it was the villages, right? And President Trump is actually at the villages. So the villages was the hot location, or Del Webb, Sun City out in Arizona. From a location perspective, does anybody know where the #1 area for retirement is right now? And it's actually spread out throughout the country. College cities right now are all the rage. Individuals are relocating to college cities. Young, active lifestyle, you've got the Harris Teeters, you've got the different, you've got the Starbucks, you've got all these things right at your fingertips or right at your footsteps, right? You've got probably one-floor living designed for the quality of life that we want, cutting-edge healthcare, and great transportation. So they're all the rage right now, and that may continue. It may be a 50-plus community. Continuing care retirement communities are continuing to pop up. Some of them are beautiful. The price tag on some of these is absolutely astronomical, but they're beautiful places. Maybe we do want to stay in our home. So I think the quicker we can get to these three questions, this is kind of the core fundamental of the presentation. Yeah, that was our response too. Dr. Joe came to us, and he said, I think I've solved and I've cracked the code as far as quality of life in retirement. Now, there's a lot of great tools and resources from a quantity perspective. You know, if I need $1 million, need 1.2, I need 3 million, whatever it is. A lot of great tools and resources. But how do I predict one's quality of life in retirement? So Joe came to us and he shared those three images. And we said, Joe, I think you cracked. I don't know if you cracked the code, but I think you cracked, right? He said, no, just listen to this process and listen to his thought process. So he thankfully put the wording underneath it. And the idea behind this is, where do I plan on living in retirement? AARP did a recent study and asked individuals approaching age 65, where do you plan on aging? 90% of us responded saying we want to age in our current home. It's maybe where I was married, have a mortgage and memories. The challenge is, as we get older, our homes get older. How can we physically age in that home safely? What is one of the biggest physical obstacles to aging in a home? It's right here, right? It took me about 20 minutes to get down the stairs, if you noticed. I got terrible knees, right? So that's very intimidating. It's not to say we're going to open the doors now and we got realtors coming in to help you downsize, right? But have we thought about, if we do want to age in this home, can we age in this home safely? There are markets and industries booming right now, allowing us the opportunity. If you're thinking about doing anything in your home, any modifications, inside, outside the home, I would ask you to consult and find out if this person has a designation. It's a CAPS designation, C-A-P-S, Certified Aging in Place Specialist. It's the fastest designations historically any contractors have ever gotten. They get physical online and physical training, and they become CAPS certified. Certified Aging in Place Specialist. And the idea behind it, I know it's not exactly the same, but has anybody ever gotten a flyer in the mail from a gas and electric company thinking if we allow you to come in your home, we'll show you ways to cut your heating bill in half or something? CAPS people can do the same thing, but CAPS people can identify obstacles to aging in the home. If we're going to redo the bathroom, we now make it sense to make it handicap accessible. Have we thought about maybe putting a Murphy bed in downstairs? Everybody redoing their kitchen. We want the big island and we want the tall cabinets. They're terrific when we're in our 50s. They may not be accessible when we're in our 70s or 80s. So CAPS people can identify obstacles to aging in at home. Anybody here have a smart home? No? A couple? Smart homes are great. I'd rather have a safe home. So how can I use technology to keep me safe in that home? And I think that will be the rage as we go forward. So carpet manufacturers, for example. Carpet manufacturers, probably no big surprise, but they commissioned a study to find out when folks suffer a fall in the home, where it is and what time of day or evening. And again, probably no big surprise, but generally speaking, if there's a fall in the home, it happens between the master bedroom and bathroom, and it happens between midnight and 6 a.m. Get up in the middle of the night, do what we need to do. Carpet manufacturers actually have developed the ability to tear up your carpeting, Put pressure sensors in the padding. Lay the carpet back down as if they were never there. You can control it from your phone. You can keep the sensors on all the time. You can turn them on, turn them off, whatever the case may be. But if you fall in the middle of the night and you're laying there for too long, the carpet denotes too much weight in a certain area. It knows that you've fallen. They envision that being able to call 911. Anybody here have an Apple Watch? Apple Watch basically does the same thing if you suffer a fall. I thought it was interesting with the development of the Apple Watch and that feature, because anybody remember about 25 years ago, there was a sweet old lady that was on TV. She said, I've fallen and I can't get up. What did we cut her slack-wise? About a minute, minute and a half before we started picking on her? Right now, Apple comes up with the same feature. It's the coolest thing in the world. I think we owe her an apology, unfortunately. But I do think that's where technology can help us. So thinking about that. Secondly is how will I get an ice cream cone? When we close our eyes and think about that next phase, maybe we're working part-time, maybe we're working full-time, maybe we're scaling back. How are we getting around? Transportation will be a bigger and bigger issue. Some beautiful cars out there. I don't know if they're up for sale or if we can borrow them for the rest of the night. If we can, I'll be out of here in about 50 seconds because I love cars. But thinking about transportation will be a bigger and bigger issue. I think we're blessed in this generation because we have options. We have Uber, we have Lyft. We may have driverless cars down the road. I think we're ways from that, but that feature may be available. Public transportation, as you know, as I mentioned with Dr. Joe, working on making that more efficient and more appealing. So we'll continue to see more flexibility. We want to think about that and continue to be on top of that and think about what our options are. Anybody here taking an Uber or Lyft? Some type of ride? Terrific. I think it's going to continue to grow, and by no means are they going to be the last two companies. But I think that flexibility that it represents, it's really an important part of the marketplace. AAA did a study where they found individuals, unfortunately, that give up the keys traditionally, don't get up, don't get out, and stay as active. And unfortunately, the decline mentally and physically starts to kick in, where now we have that flexibility. We can get up and get out with an Uber, or we can have Amazon drop it right off at our doorstep, right? So if we have some challenges and we need things delivered to the home. So I think that will continue to be an opportunity. Last but not least, and of the three questions, I think it's the most important one. It's a social networking question. Who will you have lunch with? We really want to think about that. Generally speaking, there's a big difference between males and females as far as strength of one's social network. Anybody want to venture to guess who does a better job building relationships? I can never even get the question out. Males or females? Gentlemen, we know. We don't even want to answer, right? Females do a phenomenal job, generally speaking, building relationships inside and outside the workforce. Well, what does that mean? What if we're the first ones to retire in our group? Who are we going to spend time with? Who do we eat lunch with the day before we retired? Who are we going to go forward? More importantly, what if we're the last one in our group and other folks have already gone on to do things? This hit home with me because I was doing a seminar. I literally had a husband and wife in the front row, and I could see the gentleman get a little animated. I said, is there a comment or a question? And he said, coincidentally, I want to let you know that next Friday is the day. And I said, what's that? He said, the day. And I said, well, I know it's a day of the week, right? Is it a holiday or something? He said, no, it's the day I'm going to retire, and we're going to spend 100% of our time together. What do you think the reaction from the spouse was? Yeah, not what I thought either. I thought it was going to be a honeymoon moment. I'm going to take my camera out, take a picture. Thank God I didn't. I think her eyes rolled in the back of her head. It's probably a long ride home for the two of them, right? He was on such a high, and then he was on a low. We want to think about that. We want to make sure that we stay active, stay busy. We want to build that strong social network. Think about people that you know are in that phase currently. Those that probably enjoy and are successful in that phase probably have a strong social network. They're doing things. They're getting up, they're getting out, and they're staying active. Again, we need that sense of purpose. So managing that longevity phase. If you're a caregiver, I applaud you. Probably one of the most challenging roles, physically, financially, and mentally. Every family's identified a caregiver in the family. Whether they know they're a caregiver or not sometimes is a little different, right? But generally speaking, it's the oldest female in the family. I'm one of 6 children, 5 boys in a row, and then my sister. Who do you think's the caregiver in our family? Put it a different way. There's 5 knuckleheads in a row that you wouldn't trust anybody with. Then there's my sister. I often joke that she got up too quick at a Thanksgiving Day table. We voted her in very quietly, and then mom's the word, right? So she was. She took care of my mom and dad. Unfortunately, both have passed, but she was the primary caregiver. The challenge was she was also a mom of 3, and she was a school teacher. Well, she had to take a lot of time off. She had to do a lot of different things, physically, financially, mentally challenging. Now, we try and chip in financially. We try and spend time with dad or with mom, but it became a really challenging role. So if you're doing that role or you're going to do that role, I applaud you. That's certainly an honorable role. I think it's something we want to think about and be prepared for. What's interesting, we think about different age ranges. What's on our minds? Healthcare kind of is there, but then it drops down a little bit where it's more finances, right? And we're busy going, trying to save for retirement, focused on retirement. And then all of a sudden we get to that age where health becomes more important. We really want to focus on that. We want to continue to take care of ourselves, and we want to kind of have that breath of fresh air and continue to focus on that as we go forward. So I think caregiver responsibilities, maybe being part of an organization if it's a new role for you, leaning on your advisor who knows some other caregivers in the area. There's some services available today. I think one of the first presentations was a Medicare presentation. I wasn't able to attend, but I think that's a terrific presentation to lead with. And I think those types of opportunities will continue to expand. If you scratch your head like I do with Medicare, I think we're all in good company, right? I think the challenge sometimes is someone suffers a fall, has some type of diagnosis. How do we get started? There's ideas like care concierge and different organizations popping up. Individuals retiring from Blue Cross and other organizations saying, I want to set up a consulting business to help individuals as they approach phases of their life where they have some challenges. So we'll continue to see more and more opportunities. Maybe it's just the daily living types of things where we have things delivered to the home or someone come in to help us maintain the home. But again, I think for so many of us, if we do want to age in our home, how can we age in that home safely? We want to think about opportunities where people can come in and also continue to care for us and maybe take some of that stress off. So I think that will continue to be an important factor and certainly continue to be an important feature for us. And then last but not least, not to bring us on a down note, but the solo journey, right? It's rare that you meet someone or meet a couple where they both passed away at the same time, or partners where they pass away at the same time. Generally one passes away, unfortunately, and that other one kind of goes through that process. Regardless of the situation, certainly a challenging time. But generally speaking, those that kind of go through that a little bit easier, and again, it's always a challenging time, are those that have that strong social network, have really done some of the things and have prepared for these types of ideas. So to some extent, living alone may be a new experience. Revisiting those first 3 phases, not necessarily a honeymoon phase, but going through that experience alone possibly, or maybe with the kids or grandkids. Maybe they weren't included in the conversation the first time, or second time through they are. But again, maintaining that strong social network. I will tell you, this hit home with me firsthand because both my grandfathers passed away in the same year. And I remember the experience being totally opposite between my 2 grandmothers. Now, neither, coincidentally, had ever learned how to drive or had a driver's license, never owned a car. More importantly, had never lived independent. And I remember when my dad's mom passed away, it was my grandparents, my dad was an only child, and us, 6 kids. And I remember my dad pleading with my grandmother to move in with us. Now again, 5 boys in a row, and then my sister. Probably smart in hindsight that she didn't move in with us, right? She was a little fearful, I think, of what we would do to her to some extent, or what she'd do to us, quite honestly. She was tough. But she said, I've never experienced living on my own. I want to try it. Well, unfortunately, after about a couple of years, we really found out that she really didn't have a strong social network. Her social network really consisted of kind of doting on my grandfather to some extent. Well, sadly, after a couple of years, acquired a disease, that isolation. We did what we could. My dad certainly did what he could, my mom. But unfortunately, the prognosis wasn't good, and unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years later. My grandmother Romans, on the other hand, my mom's mom, totally different experience. She had 4 daughters and a son. She had strong relationships. She was active in church, active in her community. Certainly went through that grieving process, never learned how to drive, never lived independently, but wanted to try it. The experience was totally different. And I think because of the fact that she had that strong social network, a couple things that kind of struck me and I think were a little different. She lived in a small home near a regional airport in New Haven, Connecticut. And the airport was starting to expand. They wanted to take jets and they had to expand their runway. One of the areas that they were plowing over, taking over, was employee parking. So a couple of years after my grandfather passed away, she got a knock on the door. It was from a pilot. And the pilot said, I've driven by your house for a number of years. I've noticed the last 6 or 8 months or so, or a year or so, no cars in the driveway. Is there any chance you'd be willing to let me park in your driveway? She said, any chance? I'd be thrilled to have you, right? Well, this guy became the best salesman in town for her because he told his co-pilot. They told the flight crew. The flight crew told the ground crew. We used to joke, literally, my grandmother would set up an umbrella in the morning and hand out little tickets, right? And allow them to park. Thankfully, they were all kind enough to knock on the door, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, just check in with her. So it gave us peace of mind. Secondly, more importantly, I remember my mom saying one day, even as a child, I remember this, she said, we got to go over to Grandma's house because last night she had book club. Now, I should have known with the air quotes something was up, right? But I remember as a young child walking through a home, and I remember 2 distinct things. One, there wasn't a book to be had anywhere in the home. But 2, that sink was full of wine glasses. So, like, sign me up. Book club is the place to be. I think the strong social network. I think we want to think about that. So sadly, thinking about living independently, widowhood. Believe it or not, we had that triple checked. The average age of a widow is 59 years of age. What I think is even more intimidating is that other factor on the other side. Divorce rate, 50 plus. There's a term out there, graying divorce. There's a reason that term exists, because the fastest population, fastest group getting divorced are over the age of 50. Again, you're having that time. We're starting to, maybe live together, and we're having some friction, having some challenges. So are there some ideas? Are there some thoughts, some things that we can do to make sure that we're successful in this phase? So as we kind of go through that solo journey, we're going to enter those 3 phases again, thinking about their retirement as an individual. Well, I think it's important to think about some factors. If you have a husband and wife that live in a home and one passes away, do your average expenses go down by 50%? They don't, right? If you keep that same home, maybe one car, but you have insurance, you have taxes, your expenses go down on average about 25%. So we want to prepare for that. Car expenses continue to be such. There was a study done, individuals relatively healthy in their 70s, the number one out-of-pocket expense was their home. Believe it or not, number 2 was transportation. I usually get some pushback saying it's got to be healthcare. Again, relatively healthy in their 70s. Number 3 was healthcare. Now, unfortunately, as we acquire disease or something challenging happens, that's going to outweigh everything else. But number 1 is our house. Number 2 is transportation. Keeping up with the car, maybe gas, tires, whatever, new car, whatever it is. So we want to build that into our portfolio. We want to think about that, especially as we enter that phase on our own. Is this a house that we both enjoy? Is this a house that we can both live in? If something happened to one, can I live in this safely? Is this a house that we really can age in? So we want to think about opportunities with that. So I think it's important to think about that. A 1-point difference in social activity corresponds to a 5-year difference in motor function. I will tell you firsthand, I'm not just a preacher of this stuff, I'm a practical user. When I first saw this presentation, coincidentally, my son was graduating from college and was moving out, got a job and was moving out. My daughter is a senior in college right now. I really started thinking about the home that we live in. I remember yelling to my wife one day and calling her name. She didn't come out for about 10 minutes, but I heard the echo for a while. She said she didn't hear me. I'm like, the whole neighborhood heard you. It was echoing through. I didn't hear you. I said, why are we living in such a big house? So we downsized. We sold our home in Charlotte, outside of Charlotte. We moved into the city. We live in 1-floor living. Does anybody here live in 1-floor living? Oh, it's dynamite, isn't it? For those of you living there. I've got 2 bedrooms upstairs for my kids. I haven't been up there in about 6 months. I don't even know if the roof is still on anymore. I don't care. I don't have to worry about it, right? First floor, the air conditioning works, the heat works, low threshold showers, walking in right from the driveway. I don't have to worry about any stairs. I have stairs going up the stairs to the 2nd floor. I rarely go up there. So again, thinking about 1-floor living. We live in a small gated neighborhood, townhome association. I don't cut the front, I don't cut the back grass. My wife feels very comfortable as I travel. Secondly, more importantly, if I'm being honest, my social network is horrendous. Because I travel 3 or 4 days a week, I build relationships with folks that I travel with on the road. That becomes certainly a challenge, right, as I retire or downside, because I'm not going to be able to travel with all these folks. It's going to be a little weird if I start traveling with all these guys and I'm out working for the company, right? So I really started thinking about what I could do. Building my social network, getting up, getting out, staying active, and staying busy. And my wife's been on me a while to start to try and lose weight, so I said, maybe exercise is the key. If this is kind of your model or path, you may want to divert or you may want to tweak it a little bit. My idea behind exercise was, why not take up swim lessons? I've been able to swim since I was a kid. I swim okay. But I've never been that person on the end of the pool, on the lap lane, that just goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And that was kind of my dream. I thought I'd get in great health. I'd meet some folks, get up and stay active and stay busy. I will caution you that it's very difficult to find a coach of swimming who's used to dealing with somebody who's 55 years old. But there are a plethora of coaches that are used to dealing with 7-year-olds. The problem is, to learn how to swim better, you've got to work with a coach who's used to working with 7-year-olds. There is nothing in this world more humbling than when you're in a pool and you have the lap of your life, and there are kids all around the outside of the pool doing the little swimmy stuff, right? And the parents and grandparents are taking pictures of them. You're in the middle lane doing the lap of your life. You get done, and at the top of your lungs, your coach says, "Mike, you did so great." For the love of Pete, I know how to swim, right? And then for some reason, you're trying to explain why you're the creepy guy in the middle of the pool. So swimming, I don't even know why I shared that story, but I feel better. Now we get it on tape, too. I feel even better. Swimming may not be an option, but I do think we want to think about this. We want to think about, where do we plan on living? And again, it's rare that I meet somebody that says, I know exactly the answer to the first 3 questions. But I think they are important to have that conversation. I was lucky enough to do some different articles and give some feedback. And one of the things I did recently with U.S. News and World Report was thinking about where we want to live in retirement in vacation homes. So in Charlotte, for us, the easiest beach to find is Hilton Head. I know, boo-hoo, right? It's the worst beach in the world. It's one of the most beautiful beaches. But coincidentally, from Charlotte, it's only 4 hours door to door. It's one of the easiest beaches for us to get to. Hilton Head is beautiful. If you've ever been down there or seen, one of the things, if you haven't gone down in a while, one of the things you'll notice is beautiful beach homes, but the very first thing you see now that you didn't see 10 or 20 years ago was stairs. Because those houses have been wiped out by hurricanes, so now they have to put them up on stilts. And I said, imagine you build that dream home and all of a sudden you can't get in because you haven't built an elevator in. So thinking about modifications to the home, maybe it's an elevator, maybe it's some features in the home, maybe it's cameras, maybe it's a stovetop that turns off if you don't turn it off. So there are features. Technology will continue to grow and continue to help us. Again, I think smart homes are great. I'd rather have a safe home, so combining those features. But I do think having that social network and having that strength of one social network. And again, think of those folks that you know that may have been in that phase. Those that are probably successful in that phase, the reason they're successful is they've probably had that strong social network. So, not to make this feel like longer than 8,000 days, but again, I think one of the keys with 8,000 days is it may be 10,000 days. It may be 12,000 days. Unfortunately, it might be 2,000 days. We just don't know, right? That's the biggest unknown. Again, I think life expectancy is such that we compare it to our parents and grandparents, where we want to think about ours and future generations. Think about those visuals. I'm a big visual guy. Anybody here watch the Today Show? Remember Willard Scott used to celebrate anniversaries? Al Roker does it now. Not that against Al, doesn't do a great job compared to Willard Scott. By the way, has Willard Scott ever gotten the weather correct in his life? Just one time, hedge your bets, man, partly cloudy, right? But what did he used to celebrate? Milestones, right? Smuckers, and he celebrated milestones. Do you know, to be on that program mentioned today, you have to be 95 years of age. Imagine if you're a great-grandmother, great-grandfather in the middle of Iowa, your claim to fame, you just want to be on that program, and you're 94 years of age. You got to hold on, right, because you want to be on that program. So thinking about that, 95 years of age. I was on the West Coast recently, and my wife was on the East Coast, and if you can't tell by now, I'm a little sarcastic. And I'm watching this little segment of Al Roker doing this, and he's celebrating all these milestones. And one picture in particular came upon me, and unfortunately, I called my wife and thought this would be funny or I'd have a few days to fly home. So I said to her, you know, celebrating these milestones. They had an individual who was 107. They had a woman who was 105. They had twins, I think they were either 99 or 100. And they had a husband and wife celebrating 75 years of marriage. Zoomed right into that one, right? 75 years of wedded bliss. Called my wife immediately. I said, I found the secret of a long and happy marriage. She said, what is it? I said, 75 years of wedded bliss. She said, you're killing me. What's the secret? I said, if you look in the photo, they're both looking in opposite directions. She didn't think it was funny, by the way. Mrs. Lynch has no sense of humor whatsoever. So let me just wrap this up. I can't thank the folks enough for having us, the whole team. I know you've got some great resources. What a terrific firm. What a terrific activity and a terrific location to do these events. So selfishly, Pat Coyle and I, who work for Hartford Funds as well, we can't thank you folks enough for having us tonight. Really terrific opportunity. I think what they do a great job on is really thinking about longevity or retirement is two phases, the financial but also the non-financial. You know, we can predict one's quantity of life in retirement through the calculators and tools and resources. We really want to focus on the quality of life as well. We want to make sure both of those are taken care of. So exercises like this, partnerships that we have with MIT, helping us begin to have the conversation. Maybe we're already in that phase. It's an opportunity to maybe re-examine. If we're entering that phase, I think for some of us, it may be fearful. Maybe we want to try before we buy. For so many of us, we probably worked since we were kids. I worked since I was 12 years old. I can't imagine not working anymore. I continue to want to stay active and busy. I don't know if it's this role or other roles. Clearly, it's not a stand-up role, so I've given that up, right? But maybe it's other types of opportunities. We want to think about those things and really kind of focus on those equally as important from a financial perspective. So let me just leave you with this quick quote for Joe. But the 4 retirements enable a clear vision to plan and to anticipate what is likely to come. Effective preparation can thereby reduce the stress of uncertainty and boost prolonged independence and control in the life so many wish to lead tomorrow. So by Dr. Joe there. So again, on behalf of Hartford Funds, thank you very much for the opportunity tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you.